Yeah, it potentially could. I haven't seen the investment from USGS in the type of, multidisciplinary teams
Mhm.
to do kind of large scale computational models. There are certainly individual scientists that are involved. Rob Graves is heavily involved with SCEC, but from my perspective, in the US at least, it's the national labs and SCEC who are working together for these large scale simulations.
Yeah. I just have a couple of final comments and then I'll let you wrap up if it's okay.
Sure, yeah.
Very briefly, I just wanted to make a couple of comments, and I think the presentations were absolutely great from all the speakers, and everybody really did a great presentation, and they adhered to the time or schedule, so that was really wonderful. I think our organizing committee spent a lot of time and care developing our invitation list for the speakers. And we had a lot of debate and discussion about that. And I think that really paid off. So I really want to thank all of the presenters. For this problem set, there's clearly a great value in getting the earth scientists, the geotechnical and the structural engineers together in quote one room, if you will. So I'm hopeful that through peer and other organizations, this dialogue will continue with this multidisciplinary group. And I think that's really great. The organizing committee is not done. I don't know if they know this yet, but we're going to continue after the forum to capture and document some of the key themes and talks that we will then deliver to peer as part of this project. And since peer provided some support, so we'll be doing that. And then finally, I think in my mind, hopefully
not tonight, right?
Not tonight. No, we'll get tonight off.
Okay.
And I will say, in the spirit of moving forward, I hope that this forum represents the beginning of an ongoing series of discussion and activities for peer in this area. And so I'll just leave with that thought that I think peer can help here, much as was just said in integration with the engineering community. And I think that's an opportunity.
Thanks, David.
Hiroshi-san has a question in the Q&A. If Hiroshi-san, you can ask directly if you want.
Okay, I think it is great to have those kind of database for engineers that download and use. But when they use this information, they need also the occurrence of probability of these synthetics attached to the events because they need to select either the criteria to be used as once in a lifetime or 1/10 in the lifetime of their buildings. So how do you consider to attach this probability of occurrence with each synthetics? Because the probabilistic approach, all the occurrence of each event are aggregated into the single spectra for the recurrence rate specified by 475 years, once in 475 years and once in 2400 years or something. So it's easy for engineers to choose the damage criteria for each specified spectra. But when we distribute these synthetics, they also need this kind of information for the occurrence of each strong ground motion.
I don't think that's how we're thinking of going at it. The ground motion data set provides options for people to use given that they have a design spectrum already, right? So they've done their hazard calculation, they have a design spectrum, and they can, the first part is just being able to choose some simulated ground motions that go with their design spectrum and the scenario from the deaggregation, as opposed to only looking at recorded ground motions. So I don't see that we have to start assigning rates of occurrence to these. If you're gonna though go to later on just running things like CyberShake, where there's a rate of occurrence and a time series, and from that you're going to calculate the hazard directly. That's what we're looking at sort of in phase 3. Then you would need rates of occurrence to attach to the different models. But we're starting out a little slower than or not going as far as what you're describing. Does that make sense, Velocity?
Okay, so eventually we need to specify the occurrence of probability of occurrence for each synthetics that we will provide to engineers in the phase 3 implementation.
And essentially, it would be the rate of the scenario that we get in the normal seismic source characterization, and if the randomized values are, if the time series are source model is equally likely, it would just be, if I had 30 synthetics for a scenario, then each one would have 1/30th of the rate of the scenario by itself. But that's a ways away, because then you need the CyberShake type of thing with millions of simulations, and initially we're not going to try to go that far, because we're going to be bridging between sort of hazard results from a normal way we do hazard calculations to time histories that we can grab from the simulations. David, does that meet with what you're thinking, or are you thinking all the way to the CyberShake type calculations?
To me, who's that addressed to?
To you. So when we think about,
Well, I wasn't specific. I'm just thinking about whatever direction this takes as a result of. Did I just get cut off?
no, but maybe I can say, I think the main value is going to be making the simulations accessible to people so that they can start to look at them and get familiar with them and what they do and what they don't do.
Yeah.
They'll be comparing those simulations to their current design spectrum, right? That's what's going to happen initially. And then we want to be able to run hazard using more of the features from the simulations, right? That would be, let's say, phase 1, bringing that into the hazard calculation as it starts to sort of change the spectral shape, let's say, for a particular area that might amplify 3 seconds and de-amplify, 2 seconds or something like that. But just getting people to start to use them and look at the simulations is the first step.
Yeah. And make the data available.
Right.
Yeah, I'm sorry, my screen blanked out. It may be an omen. My screen went black. I think it's somebody trying to tell us the meeting's over.
No, it's no problem from Zoom side. Yeah.
Okay. Well,
may I speak?
Sure.
I think if that is the case, it is very important, because I'm concerned about the one class SMORA event at the same fault. In the current long-term prediction for active fault, they only consider the kind of largest earthquake generated by a single determined fault. But the probability with the SMORA case within the same fault is much higher than the occurrence. And at some sites, those SMORA event, one class SMORA event may create the same level of ground motion, and that is not included in current Japanese way of probabilistic approach. So if the database is created by considering this kind of occurrence with the SMORA event within the same fault segment, that makes quite a sense and a good information for engineers, that engineers have to prepare for the ground motion with the SMORA magnitude event, even when we consider the same level of probability of occurrence.
So we deal with that by in our probabilistic hazard calculations, right? So as I said, initially, you would have the same design spectrum that we're getting right now, and we just would say you're trying to design for a magnitude 8 earthquake in San Francisco, rather than grabbing simulation or recorded ground motions from a bunch of magnitude 7 earthquakes and scaling them up. Let's give people the option to be using magnitude 8 simulations, right? To specify what the time series is that goes with their design spectrum. So we would cover that by just the normal way we're running hazard that includes a whole lot of, many more small events on a fault that with its own variability, and that may control at one particular case. But if we're getting all the way to the last phase, then you have to be doing the simulations, not just for the biggest events, but the 3D simulations for the range of scenarios that might control the answer. So
Okay,
I
great.
think that's several years down the line, but that's ultimately what we'd like to do if you can get the volume of simulations up to the kind of numbers like what CyberShape does.
All right, are we done?
Any more comments? So
Holly, do you have one more slide? I think slide 6.
yes.
Oh, okay.
Since I had this slide for a while now, so I am not gonna try to read it. I'll just make some comments just to remind ourselves that in day 1, we talked about synthetic motions, we talked about geotechnical modeling, we talked about structure regional scale simulation, and today we had very good talks on validation metrics and acceptance criteria, characterization and propagation of uncertainties, and then the last session, which I participated in, is how to move that effort on the synthetic motion to be adopted by a larger community. I agree with David that presentations were great. I would like to thank Amarnath and his team, Erica, Christina, and Gabriel, who help a lot in this workshop. They don't get to be seen, but this is how all the work progresses smoothly. So I just want to say, as David said, this is not the end of this forum. I would like to see the possibility of having a sort of a peer report coming out of this forum with some maybe sharing your presentations and putting it in a document that can be useful to those who didn't have a chance to attend. We will make the videos available, and we will include some of these summaries in the report. 3 more comments I want to make. I think these polls were very useful. We already talked about the first one, which identified the interest of this group in developing this database. But there were also equally good ones that identified gaps that is very important for an organization like PEER to know what is the feedback of the community of where are the elements that we should push for in our research agenda. So there will be also a collection of these. I know Amarnath is keeping track of all these results. So hopefully that will be part of the report as well. Couple of last comments. I think from a peer point of view, the 2 big action items would be the peer, for a lack of a better word, fast working group to be mobilized so they can plan the strategic path for the synthetic ground motion database at PEER, and possibly also PEER should go after a pilot project in the spirit of the phased-in approach that Norm has mentioned, so we don't have to run before we walk. So this pilot project could be between Equisim and peer, so we can develop a pathway for the inclusion of their synthetic motion in the peer ground motion database, the new database to start with. And if we set a deadline to present that to the community on the upcoming peer annual meeting, which is about 6 months from now, I think that will be a great goal to go after. With that, I thank all the speakers, all the organizers, and thank you very much. Anything else, David, Amarnath?
I just want to second the thanks to the peer group. They've been absolutely phenomenal. And, they really made this a seamless operation for a large number of people. So Amarnath and crew, thank you very much.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Khalid. I have just a couple of comments. Well, thanks for the last group. This was the toughest